All right. We are going to look at the study guide for the 1 to 9 quiz. So, first, what do these words mean? Parabola, what does it mean? What is the parabola?
The shape of a quadratic equation.
Okay, so that is the shape of a quadratic equation. Okay, good. I probably spelled quadratic wrong. Did I spell it wrong? Yeah. All right, what is the minimum? Okay, when the vertex is at its lowest point. The next one, the maximum. The maximum when your vertex is at the highest point. Okay? Roots, zeros, solutions, x-intercepts. When your graph crosses the x-axis. Last one, vertex form. What is vertex form? This one's not going to be really a definition so much of just the formula. What is your vertex form formula? F of x equals a parentheses x minus h close parentheses squared plus k. All right, that's your vertex form. And your standard form. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Right? There are your formulas / your definitions. Need time to write these down? Okay. Formulas. The first one, your quadratic formula is what? X equals negative b plus or minus square root of all of that is over 2a. Okay? Quadratic formula. Axis of symmetry formula. What's in front of it? X equals negative b all over 2a. You don't have the x equals, it is wrong. Remember, it is a line. Okay? You must have that x equals. Okay? My discriminant formula. B squared minus 4ac. It's not going to have an equal sign. It's not going to say x equals. But it's just b squared minus 4ac. These formulas you must have memorized. You must have them memorized. Okay? Questions on the formulas? All right. 1 through 4. Find the zeros of each quadratic equation using any method. Okay? What method should we use for number 1? Factoring. Could I use quadratic formula? Yes. Quadratic formula will always work. All right? So factoring. Use your X or your snowflake method. All right, so what's your A value? Just understood 1 right here. What's your B? Negative 10. What's your C? Okay? So, what goes on the top of this X? A times C, which is 24. On the bottom, your B is your negative 10. Okay? Now, your factors of -4 that adds together to give you -10, -6, -4. Right? If you're doing the snowflake method, you know you have an x on the top right here. Right? Now what do I do? Make my binomials. What are my binomials? X minus 6, x minus 4, and this all equals 0. It says to find the zeros, so I need to know what x equals. So what do I do next? X minus 6 equals 0. X minus 4 equals 0. Now what? Add 6 to both sides. So x equals 6. Add 4 to both sides. So x equals 4. What are my roots, my zeros, my solutions, my x-intercepts? 4 and 6. And remember, those go in curly brackets. Questions on number 1? All right. Let me start writing it. All right, number 2. What do I do first? Get it equal to 0. How do I do that? Add 1. Okay, I have a question. Did it tell us what method to use? No. Could I do completing the square on this one? It's half there, right? It is. I could complete the square, but you guys said to add 1, so add 1 on both sides. When I add 1 on both sides, I am left with x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Now what? What method do you want to use? Factoring again. Okay? So that means go to your x or your snowflake. What goes in the top? 1. What's on the bottom? -2. My factors on the sides? -1 and -1. Don't forget snowflake has the next there. Right? Now what? My binomials. What are my binomials? Right? Now what? Set each ordered pair equal to 0. So x minus 1 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. Now what? Add 1 to both sides. Why do we add 1? Because what? See that x by itself. What kind of operations are those? Starts with an I. Inverse operations, okay? So x equals 1, x equals 1. What goes in curly brackets? Curly bracket 1. Okay. Questions on number 2? Everybody still writing? Okay. Number 3. What do I do here? I could factor difference of squares, or I could notice that there's no b value and use what? Square root method, right? If you want to factor this difference of squares, completely fine. Square root method, no b value, so what do? How do I get the x squared by itself? Add 64. When I add 64 to both sides, I have x squared equals 64. Now what? Take the what? Square root of both sides. What goes in front of that square root of 64? Plus or minus. So x equals what? What kind of 8? Plus or minus 8. Is my x by itself? Yes, so am I done? Yes, how do I write my final answer? Curly bracket, plus or minus 8. Questions on 3. If you factored and saw that this was different to squares, that's fine too. It just takes probably an extra step or so. Either way will work. Questions on 3. Anybody still writing 3? Finished. Number 4. Uh-oh. What do I do? Quadratic. Why quadratic? Because it what? Always works. Every time it will work. All right, so what do I have to do first? Label what? Label my A, B, and C. What's my A value? What's the B value? What's the C value? Right? Now, plug in your formula. X equals negative. What's B? 11 plus or minus the square root of 11 squared minus 4 times 2 times 12. All of this is over 2 times 2. What part did we say we solved for first? The discriminant. What is the discriminant when you solve this? Yeah. 25. Okay? That 25 tells us that how many roots? 2 because it's positive. Okay? Now what do? Rewrite. So negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 25 all over 4. Okay? If I have a number like 25, I know the square root of 25. Can I just rewrite this as negative 11 plus or minus 5 over 4? Yeah, you can. If you want to rewrite it that way, that's fine too. Right? Now what do? Split this up, right? So x equals negative 11 plus the square root of 25 over 4. Negative 11 minus the square root of 25 all over 4. And when I solve, I get x equals what? Negative 1.5 and negative 4, I believe. Okay? So put this in curly brackets. Which number goes first in your curly bracket? Negative 4, negative 1.5. Questions? Okay. Am I still writing? Am I still writing this one? Okay. Still writing. All right. On the back, find the zeros by completing the square. What do I have to do first? Subtract 44. Get the C value to the other side. minus 44 on both sides. That leaves me with x squared plus 24x equals 44. Now what? Sorry, negative 44. Now what do you do? B over 2 squared. That's the next, right? There's not an a value. So my b is 24 over 2 squared. So that's 12 squared, which gives me 144. Okay? Now that I have 144, what do I do with that 144? Add it to both sides. All right? So x squared plus 24x plus 144 is negative 44 plus 144. Now what do I do? I have a trinomial here, so I'm going to factor. You can use your x method or your snowflake method. Okay, what goes on the top? Your 144. On the bottom is 24. Okay, so x. Your numbers on the sides are what? 12 and 12. So what are my binomials? X plus 12 squared equals negative 44 plus 144? 100. Okay. From here, I need to get rid of my squares, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. What goes in front of my square root right here? Plus or minus. My square root, my squared cancel. X plus 12 equals plus or minus. Square root of 100 is 10. Now what do I do? I'm going to subtract what? 12. Why do I subtract 12? To get your x alone. You can rewrite this. So I have x equals 10 minus 12, or x equals negative 10 minus 12. And I get what as my answers? Negative 22 and negative 2. Questions? Anybody still writing? All righty, okay. Number 6. I'm still completing the square. What do I have to do first? Subtract that 6. Okay, so minus 6 minus 6. 2x squared minus 8x equals negative 6. Now what do I do? Divide by that a value. So that leaves me with x squared minus 4x equals negative 3, correct? Right, now what do I do? Take your b over 2 squared. My b value is negative 4 over 2 squared. Gives me negative 2 squared, which is 4. With that 4, what do I do next? Add it to both sides. So x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals negative 3 plus 4. Then what do I do? I have 3 terms. I have a trinomial, so next I need to factor. Right? On the top, I have 4, negative 4 on the bottom, negative 2 on the sides. You need your snowflake method. There you go. So my binomials, x minus 2 squared equals 1. How do I get rid of the squared? What do we say you do? Take the square root, Don't forget in front of the square root of that 1, plus or minus. So x minus 2 equals plus or minus 1. My next step would be to do what with that 2? Add 2. So I have x equals 1 plus 2, or x equals negative 1 plus 2. So I get, as my answers, I get 1 and 3. Questions? Let me start writing. Let me start writing. Okay. The next section. All we are doing here is identifying our transformations. Start at the beginning. On number 7, do I have an a value? No, so skip it. This negative 10, that's my h. That tells me to do what? Right. Remember, you take the opposite, so I'm going right 10. That negative 8, that's your k, so that tells you to do what? Up or down, so it's negative, so that means down. How many? 8. Down 8. Number 8. I have a negative out front, so that means I'm doing what? The negative tells me to do what? It's reflecting over the x-axis or flipping, right? The 5 tells me something different. The negative and the 5 are separate. The negative says flip. The 5 tells me to do what? Narrow. Narrow by how many? Narrow by 5. If your test is multiple choice, instead of narrow, it's going to say vertically stretched. Make sure you know vertically stretched and narrow mean the same thing. Okay? This 3, positive 3, that's my h value. That tells me to do what? Go left 3. Remember, take the opposite. Left 3. And that 19, positive, it's my k, so it tells me to do what? Up how many? 19. Up 19. Okay. Number 9. Do I have an a value? Nope. Do I have an h value? H. Remember, h is in the parentheses. Is there a set of parentheses here? No, so there's no h value. So that negative 7 is really your what? That's your k. Right? So what's that k telling me to do? Down 7. Number 10. Do I have an a value? Yes. 1/4 is my a value. It's in front of the x squared. What does that 1/4 tell me to do? To get wider. Okay, so wide by how many? Wide by 1/4. Your state test, or even if this test or quiz is multiple choice, may not say wide. What's the other word it might say? Vertically compressed. Remember, compressed means push it down, make it wider. If you see vertically compressed, make sure you know that means wide. Right? Questions 7 through 10. Okay. Everybody start writing them down? All right. 11. My axis of symmetry. What form is this in? Vertex form. If it's in vertex form, I can find my vertex. What is my vertex? 1 what? 1, 2. Remember, opposite of h, keep the k. Okay, so that's my vertex. What's the axis of symmetry? Not just 1. X equals 1. If you don't have that x equals, I'm marking it wrong. Okay? The rest of that we really can't do until we have our graph. Because I already have my table, or sorry, my vertex, I can go to my table. X, Y. What goes in my table? My vertex, 1 and 2. 0, -1, and 2, 3. It doesn't tell me how many points, so if you want to just do 3, that's fine, but I'm going to do 5 to make sure I have my graph. When I plug in -1, what do I get? I get 6. When I plug in 0, I get 3. And then I know they should just reverse each other on the bottom part. Okay? Take your second graph. -1. That's what my graph looked like. Does yours match? Yes, it should. Okay? Roots or zeros? What are my roots or zeros? I don't have any. How do you know I don't have any? It doesn't cross the x-axis. Don't just put 0. Put 0 with a line through it, which means no solution. Or I would even take none. Okay? Your domain is what? All reals. Why is it all reals? Because this is not a real world problem. And your range. Y is it greater than or equal to or less than or equal to? Y greater than. It opens up. Greater than or equal to what number? Your Y value from your vertex, so that is a 2. I would take it this way. Your state test will probably have interval notation. So remember, interval notation is bracket 2, infinity, close parentheses. Chances are your state test, and if this is multiple choice, it might have interval notation. Make sure you know that. Questions? Anybody still trying to write it down? Number 12, what form is this in? This is our standard form. So with standard form, we have to actually find the axis of symmetry. What did we say that formula was for axis of symmetry? X equals -b over 2a. So x equals negative. My b value is -2 over 2 times my a, which is 1. So x equals negative, so 2 over 2 is 1. So my axis of symmetry is x equals 1. How do I find the vertex? What do I do? Plug it in. So I would have y equals 1 squared minus 2 times 1 plus 1. And I believe when you solve that, you get y equals 0. So that makes my vertex 1, 0. Ooh, this is asking me for something different. It's asking me for my discriminant. Okay. So what's that formula to find discriminant? B squared minus 4ac. So my b value is -2 minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is 1. Remember, when you plug this in your calculator, put that -b into parentheses. So that gives us discriminant of 0. Not no solution, it's just 0. Okay? Next, I need to make my table, x, y. So 1, 0, 0, -1, 2, 3. when I plug in my x's for my y values, I get 4, 1, and then 1, 4. They reverse. Okay. Then you're going to graph. -1, 2, 3, 4. Your graph should look something like this. My roots are zeros. Where does this cross the x-axis? At what? At +1. Okay. It only crosses one time. We know that because my discriminant is 0. So that means I have one answer. 1, 0. One solution. Okay. What's your domain? My domain is all real numbers. Again, what makes it all real numbers? Because it's not a real world problem. And my range. Y is what? Greater than or equal to. Again, because it opens up. Greater than or equal to what?
0.
Not 0. Sorry. Yes, 0. My bad. 0. That's your y value of vertex. Interval notation, again, would be bracket, 0, infinity, close bracket.